Hi, I hope you're keeping well. Thanks for being with me today. In my quiet time today, I was thinking about Matthew chapter 8, verses 14 to 17, a very short story that you might know about how Jesus goes to visit Peter in his home in Capernaum. And Peter's mother-in-law is unwell, and Jesus goes in and touches her and heals her of her sickness. It's a really short story, but a really beautiful one that speaks to us about Jesus' power and his power to heal. And it led me to think today really about our relationship with power. We might have quite a complicated relationship with power when we think about political authority in our nation or in our local area, when we think about various institutions we might be involved in, or the church, or even personal relationships that we might be engaged in. And we think about the power dynamics that go on there. It may be that power is wrapped up in and exhibited through performance, or through ego, or through control, maybe even excessive control. And we might feel quite justified in being suspicious of power. But this story of Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law, I think, shows us a different kind of power. It's not really a story so much about what Jesus does, about the healing itself. I think it's a story really about who Jesus actually is, that he is our servant king, that what he does is his authority is modeled and worked out through servanthood. And there were just three really interesting ideas that I wanted to draw on today from this passage about the soft power of Jesus. And the first is this, that Jesus doesn't overwhelm us with his power. In this story in Matthew 8, in verse 14, it says, when Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. Now, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that Jesus has a very kind of quiet entrance into Peter's house. You know, he doesn't force his way in. He doesn't slam the door open and kind of barge his way into the house. He's just sort of invited in, and he goes into Peter's home. There's no big crowd there. There's no theatrics. There's no big performance. It's just a very kind of quiet entrance into the home. And then there's this beautiful phrase. It says, Jesus saw her. He saw her. I love that. It really talks about Jesus being attentively present in the moment and with Peter's mother-in-law. And, you know, we often feel invisible, don't we? We might feel invisible at work. Sometimes we feel invisible within our own family. We might feel invisible in our church, unless we're producing something, unless we are, achieving things, or, unless we're posting on social media, we feel invisible. But Jesus saw her. Jesus saw this sort of forgotten woman with a fever. And the beautiful thing is that Jesus sees you. You may feel invisible at times. You may feel forgotten. You may feel bypassed. You may feel unimportant. But Jesus sees you. And he shows his soft power. He shows his authority by seeing you, by showing up in your life and seeing you. Jesus doesn't need to have the attention of the room. Jesus exhibits his power through giving attention. And, Jesus has shown up in your life. And Jesus shows up every day, and he sees you for who you are. And he wants to bring you quiet healing. In body, mind, or spirit, whatever you need in terms of healing, Jesus can bring that to you. So he doesn't overwhelm us with his power. That's the first thing to say. And then secondly, from this passage, I was thinking that Jesus is not coercive in his use of power. In verse 15, we read this, Jesus touched her hand and the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. Now, Jesus, in that situation, he could have preached to her. He could have given her instructions, things to do. He could have challenged her. He could have challenged her about her sinfulness or about her way of life or whatever. But he does none of this. He sees her and he just touches her hand and he kind of meets her in this moment of intimacy, this moment of kindness, this moment of compassion, this moment of tenderness. And it seems to me that the way in which he heals her reveals his gentle heart. It doesn't just show his power. In Matthew 11:29, Jesus said, "I am gentle and lowly of heart." And I think that's really exhibited in this story. And then, of course, the woman then gets up and she serves Jesus. It's not like he commands her to. He has the authority to do that. He has the power to do that, but he doesn't. He just gently meets her and heals her. But then she gets up and she serves him as a free response. She doesn't serve him out of fear. And sometimes, I think that we allow fear to influence our relationship with God. We might feel that, we've got to perform for God. We might feel that, we've got to constantly be useful to him. We might be fearful that we're not being obedient enough. But in 1 John chapter 4:18, we read this, that perfect love casts out fear. When we realize Jesus' love for us and how he just loves us for who we are in the moment, unconditionally, then that means that we can be confident in who we are. And we can build a relationship with Jesus that isn't founded on fear. So, let Jesus then reshape you. Let him heal you through his gentleness, receive his kindness, receive his intimacy, and you will experience his soft power and his authority in your life. And then thirdly, this passage reminded me this morning that Jesus' power is made perfect through the cross. The story is told of Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law, and then it then goes on to talk about how Jesus then healed lots of other people as well. And then in verse 16 of Matthew 8, it says this was all these healings was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and he bore our diseases. So Jesus' power isn't just exhibited through healings and exorcisms and control over nature, calming storms and so on and so forth. Ultimately, the power of Jesus is exhibited through the cross, through him defeating the power of sin and the power of death. And there's a sense in which all the healings that Jesus undertook in his ministry here on earth were kind of a prophetic preview of all that was to come. As Jesus healed people, there was actually a cost to that, because it meant that Jesus, the pure, the divine Son of God, was absorbing himself into all the dirt and the filth and the disease and the infirmities that he would later carry on the cross. This pure being, the Word made flesh, kind of encounters and engages with and absorbs into himself all that is unclean and impure. He engages with sickness and sin and death in his life, and then ultimately, of course, in his own death on the cross as well. So Jesus kind of redefines kingship. He redefines what power and authority looks like. It's not about him ruling from above. It's about him carrying burdens from below. And that, of course, is where we end up. And that is the challenge, really, to each one of us, that Jesus brings you healing and he brings me healing in body, mind and spirit in order to transform us by this incredible power that he has. And we are transformed, and then we are transformed to become Christ-like, that we are to be transformed into the likeness of this servant king. And interestingly, it's the first time I've really thought about this. Peter's mother-in-law was the first person in the Gospels to embrace that life. She was the first person really to receive his transformative healing and then mirror Christ in her own life, because it says she was healed and then she got up and served. So by serving Jesus and by serving others, she sort of rose from sickness into a Christ-shaped life, into a life of servanthood. And that's what Jesus wants from you, and that's what he wants from me. He wants to heal us from our pain, to transform us by his power, so that we can then help carry the pain of others, so that we can then help absorb the suffering of other people, if you like, and do what we can to bring healing balm into their lives. So the question for us, I think, then out of this passage, in one sense, is, will you allow Jesus to exhibit his power in your life? Not some kind of tyrannical, authoritarian power, not a coercive power, not a intrusive power, but actually a soft power, a power of healing, a power of servanthood, to transform you into his likeness, so you can then go and live in a Christ-like manner by bringing healing and kindness and love and compassion and intimacy to other people. How will you mirror the servant heart of Christ in your relationship with other people? I hope that's been helpful. It's such a fascinating passage, isn't it? And I really would love to hear your thoughts on this passage, and perhaps your own experiences of how Jesus has brought healing into your life. So thank you for the time you've given me today. It's always a joy to be with you and to hear from you when you leave your comments, and I look forward to being with you again really soon. Take care. Bye-bye.